My brother set a quitclaim deed on top of our mother's cremation papers and told me I could sign away half her house or go home without her ashes. We were in the arrangement room at Lakeside Funeral Home with urn brochures on the table and a brass temporary urn on the credenza behind Derek. Maria Santos, the funeral director, had stepped out to print the certified copies of Mom's death certificate. I thought we were waiting in silence for 5 minutes. Derek thought he had found a private room. He pulled a manila folder out of his Carhartt jacket, slid a 2-page quitclaim deed across the table, and tapped the signature line with one dirty fingernail. "Do this now," he said, "and we walk out with Mom today." I looked down at the deed. Grantor Mason Reeves. Grantee Derek Reeves. He had already filled in the parcel number for Mom's house on Briar Glen and stuck yellow tabs on the initials line like he was closing a refinance. "Are you out of your mind?" I said. "No, I'm the one who lived with her. I'm the one who took care of her. You got to visit and be the organized one." He leaned back in the chair like he was being reasonable. "You know that house should stay with me. If you sign now, we don't have to drag this out in front of everybody. You're tying Mom's ashes to real estate." He shrugged. "I'm tying reality to reality." I could hear a printer running down the hall. 10 feet away, a machine was spitting out proof that our mother died, and my brother was trying to trade her remains for square footage. "Maria isn't going to release anything while there's a dispute," he said. "All I have to do is tell her we're not aligned on disposition. Then what? You going to explain to Aunt Paula why Mom is still sitting in the back because you wanted a payout?" That was the part he knew would land. Family like ours forgives greed faster than funeral disruption. I pushed the deed back across the table. "No." His jaw tightened, but he smiled anyway. Derek always smiled when he was closest to saying something rotten. "Then don't act shocked when everybody hears why this got delayed." Maria's shoes clicked in the hallway. Derek folded the deed once and slipped it back into the folder. When she came in, he had already put on his grief face again. Quiet voice, heavy shoulders. I realized then that he had not improvised this. He had printed the deed before we got there. He had planned the exact minute he would try to make our mother's ashes worth half a house. To understand why Derek thought he could put that paper in front of me, you have to understand the house and the version of himself he had been selling from inside it. Mom's place was a 1-story brick ranch on Briar Glen Drive with a carport and a narrow galley kitchen. She and Dad bought it in 1994. After Dad died, she paid the mortgage off early because she hated owing anybody anything. Derek moved back in 4 years before she died. Officially, it was temporary. His second divorce had blown up, his drywall crew folded, and he told Mom he just needed 6 months to get on his feet. 6 months turned into 4 years, then into him saying things like, "my utility bill," about a house that had never had his name on anything. To be fair, he was there more than I was. I live 35 minutes away because my ex and I split custody of our son, Eli, and I could not just move into Mom's spare room every other week. I work commercial HVAC service. Derek had proximity. I had logistics, so the family saw him carrying casserole dishes into the kitchen and assumed he was the sacrifice story. What they did not see was me paying the oxygen deposit when the supplier wouldn't deliver without a card. They did not see the pharmacy app on my phone, the 2 a.m. refill requests, the insurance calls, the $427 water heater replacement when it failed in February, or the time Derek texted me, "need gas money if you want me to take her to radiation tomorrow." He did real things. I won't lie and pretend otherwise. He drove her to appointments, slept on the couch when she got too weak to walk alone at night, and changed sheets after bad days. But Derek did those things the way some men carry a box through a room full of witnesses. He needed everybody to know he was carrying it. 3 years before Mom died, she recorded a transfer on death deed that left the house to both of us equally. I drove her to the county office and watched her check the spelling on both names twice. Derek knew about it too. He kept laughing about it until the end, but he had already decided equal only counted while Mom was alive enough to say no. Mom went on hospice in late August, 6 weeks after the oncologist stopped using the word treatment. By then, the house had changed shape around her illness. The recliner in the den sat angled toward the hallway so she could see who came in. There was a basket of pill packs on the side table and an oxygen concentrator humming under the window. I started carrying a red accordion folder in and out of the house because every day seemed to produce 3 new pieces of paper. Maria Santos came by one Thursday afternoon to go over pre-arrangements. Mom had been clear she wanted cremation, a short church service, and her ashes scattered at Cedar Lake where Dad used to take us fishing before life got expensive. Maria sat at the dining room table with a leather portfolio and a voice so calm it lowered the temperature in the room. Derek stayed for the first 10 minutes, then took a call about a truck part and drifted outside. That was his gift. He could make his absence sound unavoidable. Maria asked the practical medical questions. Which chapel? How many death certificates? Whether mom wanted an obituary. Then she got to the part that mattered. When the time comes, she said, one person will need to serve as the authorizing agent for cremation and disposition. That keeps the chain clear and prevents disputes. Mom looked from Maria to me, then toward the open back door where Derek's voice was floating in from the yard. Mason handles the paper, she said. Her voice was thin by then, but she did not stumble on it. He always has. Maria nodded and wrote my name down on the planning worksheet. She asked if Mom was comfortable with that. Mom squeezed my wrist once and said, he finishes what he starts. That line hit harder later than it did in the moment. When Maria left, she handed me a packet with her card clipped to the front and a checklist for what the funeral home would need after death. I slid it into the red folder behind the insurance forms and the hospice schedule. Derek came back in as Maria was pulling out of the driveway. What did I miss? He asked. Mom looked at him for a second too long and said, the boring part. He laughed and opened the fridge. I did not. I was looking at the folder in my hand and thinking how often the boring part is the only thing standing between a sad family and a disaster. Mom died at 4:12 on a Monday morning, with the hall light on and the dishwasher still half full. The hospice nurse had not even zipped her bag when Derek started asking what happened to the house. I wish that was me compressing the story to make him sound worse. It is not. Mom was still in the den, the blanket pulled up to her collarbone, and Derek was standing in the doorway, rubbing both hands over his face like grief had sand in it. We need to be smart about Briar Glen, he said. If this turns into some split-sail mess, I'm the one who gets screwed. The nurse looked up from the pronouncement paperwork and then looked right back down, which told me she had heard uglier things than that in nicer houses. Can you not do this now? I said. Now is exactly when this matters, he snapped. Then he dropped his voice because the nurse was in the room. I've been living here. I've kept this place running. You can't just parachute in and cash out. In Derek's head, every check I had written became invisible because I had not slept under Mom's roof every night. When the transport team came, I walked them through the side door because Mom hated strangers using the front step. Derek stood by the carport and watched them load her onto the stretcher. Then he said, without looking at me, you still have the extra garage key, right? I stared at him. The one Dad used to keep on the nail by the freezer, he said. I need to know what keys are out. Not where should we put the flowers. Not have you called Aunt Paula. Not I can't believe she's gone. Keys. After the van left, he walked straight into Mom's bedroom and came back out with her key ring looped over one finger. He set the house key and the side door key on the kitchen counter, kept the carport clicker and the garage opener, and said, we'll talk after some sleep, but I'm not losing this house because everybody wants to be sentimental. When I woke up later, I had 6 texts from Derek about obituary wording, one from the church secretary and one that said, need to discuss title before people get in your ear. Mom had been dead less than 9 hours, and my brother was already treating grief like a closing window. 2 days after Mom died, Derek and I sat across from Maria in her office to finalize the cremation authorization, order the death certificates, and choose the temporary urn. Maria had a legal pad, a neat stack of forms, and the kind of handwriting that makes everything look official before it even gets notarized. She walked us through each line item with the patience of somebody who had explained the same hard facts to 1,000 grieving families. Cremation permit, vital records filing, certified copies, scattering authorization. Then Maria turned the authorization packet toward me. This is where the authorizing agent signs, she said. Your mother's pre-planning notes listed you, Mason. Derek's head came up. So, only he signs? One person signs for disposition, Maria said. It keeps the chain of authority clean. What if family disagrees? Maria did not blink. Then we follow the legal authorization we have. That is why we document it. Derek leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. He asked the next question too casually, which is how I knew he was paying full attention. And release of the ashes goes through the same person? Yes, Maria said. Either direct pickup by the authorizing agent or written direction from that person. We do not hand cremated remains to whoever speaks the loudest in the lobby. I signed where she pointed, initialed 3 tabs, paid the final balance on my Visa because Derek said he was tight until Friday. Maria clipped a receipt to the file and told us the cremation would likely be completed by the start of next week. In the parking lot, Derek waited until Maria's door shut behind her. Funny setup, he said. What setup? You controlling everything after she's gone. I signed the forms because Mom told Maria I would. He looked out toward the road. Yeah, he said. We should simplify some things before that gets expensive. I should have pushed harder. Instead, I got in my truck and drove home because I was tired and still stupid enough to think shame worked on people. By the time the ashes were ready for pickup, Derek had turned that rule into a weapon in his head. After I refused to sign the quitclaim deed in that arrangement room, Derek did exactly what he promised. He walked into the hallway, put on his wounded son voice, and started laying track before I was even back in my truck. By the time I got to the stoplight at Mercer and Hillcrest, the family group chat was moving faster than I could read it. What is going on with the ashes? Derek says there is some legal disagreement. Mason, please tell me you boys are not doing this right now. Then Aunt Paula called. I could hear shopping carts rattling behind her and a turn signal clicking, which meant she was already in some parking lot, narrating the whole thing to herself. Honey, just sign whatever lets your mother come home, she said. You can sort the house out later. He's trying to make me sign over my half. Silence. Well, she said finally, if he lived there and took care of her, maybe he thinks that is fair. That was the sentence Derek had been building for years. He had made himself visible enough that fairness started bending around him. I said, he is literally tying our mother's ashes to a deed. Aunt Paula sighed the way people do when they decide both sides are being difficult, which is one of the cheapest forms of laziness there is. Nobody wants her stuck at the funeral home because of property. I almost laughed at that. Stuck, as if mom had missed a bus. Derek did not stop with family. He texted Pastor Neil that a disagreement between the boys might delay the memorial date. He told my cousin Brent I was making lawyers necessary. He texted me once, just once, because he knew the rest would do more damage. You can fix this in 10 minutes. For 2 hours, I did nothing except drive home, sit at my kitchen table, and look at the red folder mom had trusted me with. That was my mistake. Derek understood first contact better than I did. If you tell the story before the truth gets dressed, people remember your version even after it falls apart. At 3:40 that afternoon, Aunt Paula sent a final message into the group chat. Your mother deserves peace. Please stop fighting over money. Money. That was what Derek had managed to call it. Not a threat, not blackmail, not extortion built around a dead woman in a brass temporary urn. Just money. I sat there staring at the screen until I realized silence was doing his work for him. Derek had not only tried to bargain with mom's ashes, he had framed me as the son willing to let that happen. At 3:52, I stopped trying to argue with relatives and called Maria instead. She picked up on the second ring with the same steady voice she had used in mom's dining room 6 weeks earlier. Lakeside Funeral Home, Maria speaking. I told her exactly what Derek had done. No softening, no family language varnish. I said he had presented a quitclaim deed, threatened to interfere with release of mom's ashes, and was now telling people the delay sat with me. There was a pause while she pulled up the file. Mr. Reeves, she said, your brother cannot direct disposition, cannot suspend release, and cannot create a dispute we do not recognize. I leaned back in my chair so hard it creaked. He told me all he had to do was say we weren't aligned. He can say whatever he likes, Maria said. What matters is the authorization packet. Your mother designated you in pre-planning, and you signed final disposition. Our records are clear. She sounded almost offended on behalf of process. So he can't block pickup? No, the cremated remains are secured in our care until you choose pickup or written transfer. He is not listed for either. I asked if she would put that in writing. I expected hesitation. Instead, she said, give me 10 minutes. 9 minutes later, an email landed in my inbox with the subject line, authorization status, Carol Reeves. It was short, formal, and beautiful in the way only clean paperwork can be when someone has tried to use confusion as a weapon. Maria stated that Lakeside Funeral Home had legal disposition authority on file naming me as the sole authorizing agent, that no release would be made except at my direction, and that no third party had authority to alter that process. She attached a scan of the signed authorization page. My name, my signature, the date, the line where Maria had written per decedent's prearrangement instructions. Derek had forgotten the most important thing about people who actually work with documents for a living. We don't panic when someone gets loud. We go looking for the page they forgot existed. I printed the email. I saved it as a PDF. I dropped a copy into the red folder behind the hospice notes. Then I stared at the attachment for another full minute because the balance of the whole story had just shifted. He thought the funeral home answered to grief theater. It answered to paper. The next morning, I drove to Briar Glen before work and found the front door locks changed. Derek had not even tried to be subtle. A bright brass keypad deadbolt sat where Mom's old brushed nickel lock had been for 15 years. Through the storm door, I could see blue painter's tape stuck to furniture in the living room. Keep on Dad's recliner, sell on the china cabinet, dump on a box of framed church directories and extension cords. I knocked until Derek opened the door 3 inches and kept the chain latched. What are you doing? Securing the property, he said. People get weird after funerals. You change the locks on a house you do not own by yourself. You mean the house you're trying to force me out of while Mom is still at Lakeside? I looked past him. The hallway table was gone. Mom's baskets were stacked by the den. 2 black contractor bags sat by the laundry room door. Did you list things? I asked. I listed junk. You can have your sentimental stuff after we settle title. There it was again. Every path led back to the same demand. Sign first, mourn second. When I said nothing, he smiled the way he had at the funeral home. Aunt Paula gets it, he said. Pastor Neil gets it. You're making this ugly because you want your payout. I took my phone out and started shooting photos through the glass. The tape labels, the bags, the missing hallway table. Derek opened the door wider like he wanted me to step onto the threshold without permission. Go ahead, he said. Give me a reason. That was the real bait. A shove on the porch, a raised voice, one story about me snapping after mom died, and suddenly he would have the only version anybody talked about. So I stayed on the step and kept taking pictures. On the drive to my first service call, Marketplace alerts started hitting my phone because one of mom's church friends had recognized the china cabinet. Derek had listed it as estate piece, must move fast, cash only. By noon, he had texted me again. Keys stay with me until the deed issue is fixed. He still thought the ashes were leverage. He still thought the house was leverage. What he did not understand yet was that every ugly thing he did after changing those locks was turning into evidence. If Derek had gotten the fight he wanted on that porch, he would have fed on it for weeks. So I took a half day off, drove to the Butler County Recorder's office, and bought something better than a confrontation: a certified copy of the transfer on death deed. Instrument number 202 1-1-8477. Carol Reeves, grantor. Derek Reeves and Mason Reeves, equal beneficiaries. Recorded 3 years, 2 months, and 11 days before mom died. I held that stamped copy in my hand under fluorescent lights and felt my pulse slow down. Derek could tell the relatives whatever story helped him sleep. The county already had the real one. From there, I called a probate attorney my HVAC customer had recommended months earlier when mom first got sick. Her name was Jill Hanratty, and she talked like someone who had spent 20 years explaining to families that possession and ownership were not synonyms. I gave her the short version. Do not force entry, she said. Document the condition of the house, preserve the listings, and request a civil standby if you need access for inventory. If he sells assets from a shared property while threatening transfer, that helps you more than it helps him. It was a brutal phrase, but she was right. Every time Derek treated grief like a yard sale, he made himself easier to pin down. That afternoon, I built a folder on my desktop labeled Briar Glen, screenshots of the Facebook listings, photos through the storm door, the text where he tied keys to title, the funeral home email, the certified deed. Then I called the non-emergency line and asked how to arrange a civil standby for shared property access after a death dispute. The dispatcher did not sound surprised. She gave me a Saturday window and told me to have proof of interest in the property when the deputy arrived. That night, Derek sent a photo of mom's garage shelves half emptied and wrote, "Trying to get organized since you won't cooperate." I did not answer. I just dropped the message into the folder. By the end of that day, I had a certified deed, a lawyer, screenshots, a scheduled deputy, and a funeral home email with my name on the only line that mattered. He had a keypad lock and a bad attitude. At 7:18 the next morning, I stopped trying to win private arguments and sent one message to everyone Derek had been poisoning. I forwarded Maria's email to the family group, Pastor Neil, and my cousin Brent. I wrote exactly 2 sentences above it. For clarity, Lakeside Funeral Home has confirmed Derek has no authority over mom's ashes or release. Any delay in scheduling came from Derek demanding I sign over my half of the house. Then I attached the certified deed copy too. The reply started inside of 3 minutes. Aunt Paula, he said the funeral home was waiting on both signatures. Pastor Neil, thank you for clarifying. I had been told the issue was unresolved family consent. Brent, who never used punctuation until gossip was involved. Wait, he asked you to sign a deed for the house? Derek finally answered with exactly what men like him always answer when the story turns from fog into detail. That's not what happened. No version, no explanation, just a flat denial sent into a chat where Maria's letterhead was already sitting in plain view. I copied and pasted his own text from the day before. Keys stay with me until the deed issue is fixed. Aunt Paula called me this time instead of him. Her voice sounded smaller. Mason, he told us something very different. I know. Did he actually put papers in front of you? At the funeral home. She exhaled hard enough for me to hear the shame in it. Pastor Neil called next. He asked if I still wanted to proceed with the memorial service on Saturday. I told him yes, but the ashes would stay secured until after I had legal access to the house. The pastor did not argue. Derek spent the rest of the morning trying to call me. 6 times in 50 minutes. I let everyone go to voicemail. By lunchtime, he had shifted tactics and was texting Brent about reimbursement and sweat equity, which told me his first lie had already died. Maria's email was not dramatic. It simply stated who had authority and who did not. Derek had spent a week building a story around emotion, confusion, and the family reflex to calm the quieter brother down first. One clean email from the funeral home blew a hole straight through it. Once Derek lost the ashes as leverage, he reached for the next costume he thought might fit him better. He asked for a family meeting at Briar Glen that Friday afternoon, which really meant he wanted an audience inside the house before the civil standby the next day. Aunt Paula came. So did Brent. Derek sat at Mom's kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, a calculator, and 3 stapled pages he had titled caregiver expense summary. He slid them toward me with the self-importance of a man presenting audited numbers. Lost wages, $28,800. Mileage, $6,140. Meals and incidentals, $4,920. Home maintenance, $11,300. Night supervision, $18,000. Total requested reimbursement from house equity, $69,160. This is what you never saw, he said, tapping the pages. So if you want your half, it comes after I get made whole. I looked at the line for night supervision and almost smiled. Derek had charged our dying mother $50 a night for sleeping on her couch. Aunt Paula picked up the top sheet and said, maybe this is something we can account for fairly. Derek heard that and leaned in harder. Mom told me more than once the house should stay with the one who stayed. She knew what I gave up. Where are the receipts? I asked. You think caregiving comes with receipts? You made a spreadsheet. His face tightened. I know what I did. I flipped through the pages. No dates tied to actual appointments. Rounded mileage numbers. A $2,400 line labeled household support with no explanation at all. It was not a record. It was wishful accounting. And this gets paid before the house is split? Brent asked. That's right, Derek said. Otherwise, Mason walks off with a check while I get punished for staying. I set the pages down and said, okay, then tomorrow we inventory the house with the deputy there, and after that we can start comparing numbers. Derek gave me a sharp look. He had expected emotion. He had expected refusal. He had not expected me to say yes to arithmetic. Numbers scare thieves more than anger does. I hated the next part because once you start pricing care for a dying parent, everybody loses something. But Derek had already dragged the whole thing there. So when we met at the house the next morning, with a deputy standing in the living room and a clipboard in my hand, I brought what he had pretended did not exist. Receipts. I had card statements for the oxygen deposit, the hospital bed rental, the pharmacy copays, the water heater replacement, and the cremation balance. I had screenshots of grocery deliveries, Venmo transfers labeled for gas to chemo and electric bill before shutoff, and a 6-month utility summary showing the autopays coming from my checking account after Derek's debit card got declined twice in January. And I had the text, can you cover her insulin till Friday? Need $80 for gas if I'm taking her in tomorrow. I'm tapped. If hospice wants extra supplies, you'll have to order them. This babysitting gig is killing me. At the kitchen table with the deputy pretending not to hear any of it, I laid my stack next to Derek's caregiver expense summary. Mine had dates, vendors, card numbers, confirmation emails, and messages. His had round numbers and a grudge. You paid some things, Derek said, because denying everything at once had become impossible. I paid a lot of things, because you had more cash, and because you asked me to. That landed in front of Aunt Paula harder than the paperwork had. She read the babysitting text twice. Derek, she said quietly, you called caring for your mother babysitting? He started to answer, stopped, and then did what he always did when facts cornered him. He got bigger, shoulders up, voice up. He said I was cherry picking, that everybody vents, that none of this changed the years he spent there. Maybe it did not, but it changed the holiness he had wrapped those years in. By the time the deputy signed off on the civil standby, we had photographed every room, logged the major property, and boxed the things Mom had marked in old notes for me and Eli. Only one of us had numbers that could survive daylight. Derek's last real move came 3 days later. He tried it in front of the wrong woman. Maria called me at 10:06 on Tuesday morning and said, your brother is here with another family member requesting immediate release. If you are available, I recommend you come in. I was 20 minutes away at a rooftop unit on a strip mall. I told my apprentice to finish the coil rinse and drove straight to Lakeside, still wearing work boots. When I walked into the lobby, Derek was at the front counter with Aunt Paula beside him. Maria stood behind the desk with Mom's file open and both hands flat on the wood. There he is, Derek said. Tell her we're taking Mom today and ending this circus. Maria did not look at him. She looked at me. Mr. Reeves, as I explained, your written direction is required. Derek slapped the counter with one palm. I'm her son. So is he, Maria said. I lived with her. That is not the controlling issue. Maria turned the authorization page toward Aunt Paula, not toward Derek. She pointed to Mom's pre-arrangement note, then to my signature on final disposition. Mrs. Reeves's file designates Mason Reeves as the authorizing agent for cremation and release, she said. No remains have been released to Derek. No release will occur without Mason's instruction. This has been explained multiple times. Aunt Paula stared at the page, then at Derek. You told me they were holding her because both boys had to agree. Derek's ears went red. Because that's basically true. No. Maria said, calm as glass. It is not. Derek tried one last turn. He said Mom would have wanted peace and that the house issue and the ashes issue should be solved together, like adults. Maria did not even let him finish. We do not condition a decedent's remains on unrelated property transfers, she said. If this continues, I will document the interference in the file. Derek stepped back from the counter like he had finally noticed there were 2 other families in the lobby listening. Aunt Paula did not move with him. Mason, she said softly, I am sorry. I nodded once. I did not trust myself with more than that. For a week, Derek had been trying to turn our mother into a bargaining chip. In under 5 minutes, Maria reduced the whole act to what it really was: interference. After the funeral home scene, Derek finally agreed to meet at Jill Hanratty's office, which is what people do when Bluff stops paying. Jill worked out of a red brick building over a dental practice and kept her conference room cold. Derek came in late carrying the same folder he had used for the quitclaim deed. I brought the certified transfer on death deed, the funeral home email, the inventory photos, and his spreadsheet. Jill listened for 15 minutes without interrupting. Derek went first because men like him always think talking first means winning first. He said he had provided daily care for years. He said Mom wanted him protected. He said the house could not be sold because it was his residence. He said I had been remote support. Jill waited until he ran out of air. Then she pushed the certified deed copy to the center of the table. On death, she said. Title vested equally in both beneficiaries listed here. Derek tried the reimbursement angle. Jill asked for contracts, written loan terms, invoices, or anything signed by Mom agreeing to compensate him from the property. He had none. He tried oral promises. Jill asked who heard them. He had nobody neutral. He tried hardship. Jill said hardship did not rewrite recorded title. Then she gave him the only 2 real options left. You may buy Mason out at fair market value based on appraisal, she said. Or the property can be sold and proceeds divided according to title after agreed. Documented offsets, if any, exist. Extortion attempts involving cremated remains are not offsets. Derek actually laughed once, short and ugly. So I get punished for staying with my own mother. No, Jill said. You do not get paid with his share because you made yourself indispensable to the story. I watched that hit him. Not the legal language, the phrasing. Jill had named the trick. He asked for 90 days to refinance. Jill said 30 to provide a lender letter, after which we listed the house. He looked at me like I might rescue him from the sentence if he stared long enough. I did not. By the end of the meeting, even Derek seemed to know the math was closing around him. He had never prepared to own the house, only to inherit it by pressure. He left with the folder tucked under his arm and none of the swagger he had walked in with. For weeks he had acted like grief made him bigger than the rules. In Jill's conference room, he looked like what he actually was, a man who had mistaken access for title. I picked up Mom's ashes from Maria 2 days after the meeting with Jill. There was no scene this time. Maria brought the temporary urn out in both hands, had me sign one final release line, and said, I'm glad this part is back where it belongs. Mom had asked for Cedar Lake in her pre-planning notes, the little public shoreline 30 minutes north, where Dad taught us to bait hooks with numb fingers and bad patience. We went on a gray Saturday morning because Mom always liked water better when it looked honest. It was just me, Eli, Aunt Paula, Pastor Neil, and my cousin Brent, carrying folding chairs. Derek got the invite. He sent back, do what you want. Pastor Neil read a short psalm. Eli stood next to me with both hands in the pockets of his hoodie and tried hard to look older than 12. Aunt Paula cried before the first word and kept crying in the quiet parts after. When it was my turn, I did not give a speech. Mom would have hated that. I said she had kept people fed, forgiven more than she should have, and loved plain things without apology. Then I said one more line because it mattered to me more than the rest. She was not a piece of property, I said, and she was not something to bargain over. Pastor Neil looked down when I said it. Aunt Paula nodded with her mouth pressed shut. Brent, for once in his life, did not try to soften the moment into a joke. The wind took the first handful of ashes farther than I expected. Some fell to the water. Some caught the bank grass. Eli reached for the urn next and looked at me first, asking without words. I nodded. Afterward, we sat on the damp folding chairs and ate the grocery store cookies Aunt Paula had brought in a plastic clamshell. She apologized to me there by the shoreline. Not in a dramatic way, just quietly. I believed the louder version first, she said. Most people do, I told her. When we left, I kept the release copy Maria had given me tucked inside Mom's pre-planning sheet. Not that I had won, that I had refused to let Derek price the last thing we had left of her. Derek never got the refinance letter. He talked like he would right up to the deadline. Said his buddy knew a broker. Said the house appraised too low because the comps were bad. Said I was rushing a sale just to spite him. But the 30 days ran out the same way all bluff eventually does, by colliding with paperwork that needs a date and a signature. So in early November, a realtor pushed a sign into the front lawn at Briar Glen. That was the part Derek never saw when he was shoving quitclaim deeds across funeral home tables. He imagined only two endings. Either I caved and signed my half away, or he stayed in that house forever telling people sacrifice had earned him title. He never pictured strangers walking through Mom's den in clean shoes while he stacked his own boxes by the garage. By then, the tape labels were gone. The china cabinet listing was gone. The keypad lock was gone too. Jill made sure of that. What remained was a house with tired paint, a good roof, and too much argument soaked into the drywall. We sold it 6 weeks later. After costs and a small documented offset for repairs Derek could actually prove, the proceeds split almost exactly the way Mom had recorded them to split in the first place. All that noise, all that pressure, all that ugliness wrapped around ashes and church schedules and family guilt. And the ending still landed on the same 2 names in the county record. Derek took his check and moved into a rental duplex across town. The last thing he said to me in the closing office was, "You got what you wanted." I looked at him and realized how far off he still was. I did not want the sale. I did not want half a house. I did not want a deputy in Mom's living room or a funeral director explaining basic decency at a front counter. I wanted one clean month where my brother remembered our mother was a person before she became an asset in his head. What I got instead was clarity. I kept Dad's tackle box, Mom's payoff letter, and the red accordion folder that held the planning sheet, the authorization, the release, and every ugly little page that kept Derek from turning grief into a transaction he could win. Those papers did not make me feel better. They just kept me from being erased by the louder sun. If you have ever watched family turn a funeral into a negotiation, leave a comment. I still don't know how people do that with a straight face.